Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching the stars streak by through the viewport. His ship carried 50,000 human colonists to their new home on Haven's Rest, a peaceful agricultural world on the outer rim. The journey had been smooth for 3 weeks now, and Jake felt good about bringing these families to safety. Lisa Grant worked at her engineering station checking the ship's systems. She had been Jake's chief engineer for 5 years and knew every bolt and wire on this massive transport vessel. The quantum drives hummed with perfect harmony as they pushed through hyperspace at incredible speed. Tony Blake walked around the passenger decks making his security rounds. As head of ship security, he made sure everyone stayed safe and comfortable during the long journey. Children played in the recreation areas while their parents talked about their hopes for the new colony. Earth had been humanity's home for millions of years, but now humans lived on hundreds of worlds across the galaxy. They had met dozens of alien species and built peaceful relationships with most of them. The Galactic Council kept order between different races, and trade flowed freely through space. The HFY Collective had been humanity's strongest ally for 30 years. These tall gray aliens with their advanced technology helped humans build better ships and weapons. Ambassador Marcus Webb spent most of his time on the HFY homeworld, working on trade agreements and diplomatic treaties. Jake remembered meeting HFY Ambassador Velthak at the spaceport on Earth just before this journey began. The alien had seemed different somehow, more distant and cold than usual. When Jake asked about it, Velthak just said the collective was entering a new phase of development. The communication officer, Lieutenant Amy Foster, turned toward Jake with worry in her eyes. She had been receiving strange signals from across human space for the past hour. Ships were going silent, and planetary communications were cutting out one by one. Jake walked over to her station and looked at the display. Red warning lights showed lost contact with dozens of human worlds. Earth itself had not responded to any calls for 20 minutes. This could not be a coincidence or technical problem. Suddenly, every screen on the bridge lit up with an incoming transmission. The image showed High Command Zethkar, the supreme leader of the HFY Collective. His gray face looked completely emotionless as he spoke in perfect human language. "Attention all human vessels and colonies. Your species has served its purpose in our long-term planning. Termination protocols are now in effect. Do not attempt to resist or flee. Your elimination will be swift and efficient." The transmission ended, and Jake felt his blood turn to ice. Amy Foster frantically tried to contact Earth and the other colonies, but only found static and silence. Lisa Grant ran full scans of nearby space and detected massive HFY fleet movements in every direction. Jake grabbed the ship's intercom and spoke to all 50,000 passengers. He tried to keep his voice calm, but everyone could hear the fear. He told them about the transmission and that they were now alone in hostile territory. Families held each other tight as the horrible truth sank in. Within minutes, HFY interceptor ships appeared on the sensors. These sleek black vessels could outrun and outgun anything humans had ever built. Jake ordered Tony Blake to prepare the passengers for emergency evacuation procedures, while Lisa pushed the engines beyond their safe limits. The ship's communication system picked up fragments of messages from dying human worlds. Earth's great cities were burning under orbital bombardment. Colony worlds watched their atmospheres being stripped away by HFY atmospheric processors. Millions of voices cried out in terror before falling silent forever. Director Helen Cross of the Colonial Defense Force sent out one final message before Earth's communications went dark. Her voice cracked with emotion as she spoke the last words any human government would ever broadcast. "Remember us. Make them pay." Jake knew the New Horizon could not outrun the HFY interceptors in open space. The enemy ships were closing fast and would catch them within the hour. He made a desperate decision that could kill everyone aboard, but might give them a chance to survive. Dead ahead lay the Dragon's Teeth Nebula, a massive cloud of gas and radiation that no ship had ever successfully navigated. The energy storms inside would scramble all sensors and communications, but they would also hide the transport from enemy detection. Lisa Grant warned that the nebula's radiation could damage their hull and kill the engines. Tony Blake said they would be flying blind with no way to call for help if something went wrong. Jake looked at both of them and made his choice. If we stay in normal space, we all die in the next hour. If we go into the nebula, we might die or we might live. I'll take might over certain. The New Horizon dove into the swirling purple clouds just as HFY energy weapons began firing. The ship shook violently as radiation storms battered its hull. Emergency lights flickered throughout the vessel as systems started failing one by one. Jake held onto his command chair as the bridge filled with smoke and sparks. Lisa fought to keep the engines running while Amy tried to maintain minimal communications with the passenger decks. Tony coordinated damage control teams throughout the massive ship. For 6 hours they flew deeper into the nebula, while HFY ships searched the outer edges. The enemy could not risk following them into the deadly energy storms. Finally, the radiation levels dropped and they found themselves in a small, clear area, surrounded by swirling clouds. Jake ordered all non-essential systems shut down to conserve power. They would drift here in the heart of the nebula, while the ship's sensors listened for any sign of the enemy. 50,000 human beings sat in darkness, wondering if they were the last of their kind. Amy Foster managed to boost the communication array enough to scan for other human survivors. Her searches found only silence where once billions of voices had filled the spaceways. Earth was gone. The colonies were gone. Everything they had built over centuries had been wiped out in a single day. Jake stood alone on the bridge looking out at the swirling nebula that had become their prison and sanctuary. Somewhere beyond those clouds, the HFY were hunting for any humans they had missed. The galaxy believed humanity was extinct and would never look for survivors. But Jake Morrison and his 50,000 passengers were still alive. They carried with them the memory of their murdered species and the burning need for justice. The HFY thought they had won, but they had made one fatal mistake. They had left witnesses, and those witnesses would never forget what had been done to their people. 5 years had passed since the day humanity died, and Jake Morrison barely recognized himself in the mirror. The clean-shaven transport captain was gone, replaced by a hard man with scars across his face and ice in his eyes. The New Horizon had been renamed Vengeance and now bristled with weapons salvaged from destroyed alien ships. Dr. Elizabeth Kane worked day and night in her makeshift laboratory deep inside the ship's cargo hold. Before the genocide, she had been a terraforming specialist who helped make dead worlds bloom with life. Now she spent her time learning how to make living worlds die. Her hands shook as she handled pieces of HFY technology that her team had recovered from battlefields. Carlos Rivera welded armor plating to the ship's hull while sparks flew around his helmet. The former civilian engineer had become an expert in military construction after watching his home world burn from orbit. Every piece of metal he shaped carried his hatred for the species that had murdered his wife and children. Amy Foster no longer smiled when she worked at the communication station. The cheerful diplomat had spent years listening to the final screams of dying human colonies, and now her face remained frozen in permanent anger. She monitored HFY military frequencies and learned their tactical patterns with cold precision. The surviving humans had found refuge in the graveyard, a dying star system where radiation levels kept enemy sensors blind. Broken ships and asteroid bases housed the last 90,000 members of their species. Children who should have been playing games instead learned to field strip plasma rifles and calculate orbital bombardment patterns. General Patricia Stone had been a mid-level military officer before the genocide, but now commanded all human military forces. She trained every civilian in combat operations because there could be no non-combatants when your entire species numbered less than 100,000 souls. Even elderly colonists learned to operate weapon systems and plan ambush tactics. The galaxy had forgotten that humans ever existed. The Galactic Council accepted the HFY explanation that humanity had been a dangerous species that threatened galactic peace. Trade continued between alien worlds while human bodies rotted on dead planets that nobody bothered to visit or remember. The Yulmar still sold their diplomatic services to whoever paid the highest price. The Trixan merchant fleets carried goods between star systems and never mentioned the empty human colonies they passed. The other alien species went about their lives as if 50 billion murdered humans meant nothing at all. But in the darkness between dead stars, Dr. Kane made discoveries that would change everything. She had been studying HFY technology for 3 years and found something that made her blood run cold. The aliens had not just wanted human worlds or resources. They had been harvesting human genetic material for some unknown purpose. Kane called Jake to her laboratory and showed him the evidence. HFY ships had visited human colonies for months before the genocide, taking tissue samples and genetic data from thousands of people. The aliens had been planning humanity's destruction for years while pretending to be their closest allies. They didn't just betray us, Kane told Jake as she pointed at the research data. They farmed us like animals before they slaughtered us. We were never their allies. We were their livestock. Jake looked at the genetic harvesting equipment and felt something break inside his chest. The last piece of mercy in his heart turned to ash as he realized how completely they had been deceived. The HFY had smiled and shaken human hands while secretly preparing their extermination. Kane had been working on something else in the deepest part of her laboratory. She led Jake through blast doors and radiation shielding to a chamber that hummed with dangerous energy. In the center sat a device that seemed to bend light around itself like a black hole made of metal and crystal. "I call it a quantum disruptor," Kane said with pride in her voice. "It breaks apart the bonds between atoms and turns solid matter into energy. One shot from this weapon could destroy an entire city." Jake studied the impossible device and tried to understand what he was seeing. Human science had never dreamed of such destructive power, but Kane had built it using a combination of their technology and stolen HFY equipment. "She had created a weapon that could kill planets. How many can you build?" Jake asked. "As many as we need," Kane replied. "I've already started training teams to construct them. Within 2 years, we could arm every ship in our fleet with quantum disruptors." Jake thought about the implications of what she was offering. Weapons that could destroy cities meant weapons that could destroy species. The HFY had nearly wiped out humanity, but humans could return the favor with interest. They tested the first quantum disruptor on a small moon in the outer system. The weapon fired a beam of twisted energy that made the moon simply disappear in a flash of purple light. Where solid rock had existed for billions of years now, only empty space remained. Jake watched the expanding debris field and made calculations in his head. The HFY had killed 50 billion humans across 200 worlds. They had an empire of 600 planets and a population of over 1 trillion aliens. The mathematics of revenge were simple and terrifying. "They wanted to erase us from history," Jake told Kane as they watched fragments of the destroyed moon drift past their ship. "Now we're going to return the favor." Word spread through the human survivors that they finally had a weapon capable of matching HFY technology. Families who had spent 5 years hiding in asteroid caves began to hope for something more than mere survival. They began to dream of justice for their murdered loved ones. General Stone started planning military operations that would have been impossible with conventional weapons. Quantum disruptors could strike from impossible distances and leave no evidence of how the destruction occurred. They could kill without being detected and vanish without being tracked. The HFY had created monsters when they chose genocide instead of coexistence. They had taken a peaceful species and forged them in the fires of absolute loss. Now those monsters were ready to show the galaxy what happened when you tried to exterminate humans. Jake stood on the bridge of the Vengeance and looked out at the hidden fleet of human warships. Each vessel carried weapons that could crack planets and crews that had nothing left to lose. The hunt for their enemies was about to begin. 10 years had passed since the genocide, and Jake Morrison no longer looked entirely human. The quantum energy that powered their weapons had changed him at the cellular level, giving his skin a faint blue glow and his eyes a strange silver shine. He stood on the bridge of the Vengeance watching his fleet prepare for their first real strike against the HFY. The ship itself had grown into something that would terrify the aliens who had built the original transport vessel. Quantum reactors hummed in its belly while reality warping. Drives let it appear anywhere in the galaxy within seconds. Dr. Kane's weapons had transformed a civilian transport into a vessel that could crack moons. "Commander," Ryan Clark supervised the engineering teams as they installed the latest quantum tunneling systems. The young man had been just 15 when his colony world died in HFY flames. Now he commanded hundreds of engineers who built impossible weapons with the focused hatred of people who had lost everything. Lieutenant Kelly, Watson led the new breed of human soldiers through combat drills in the ship's training bays. These warriors had known nothing but war and loss since childhood. They moved with deadly precision and showed no mercy because mercy was a luxury their species could no longer afford. The first target was a HFY mining operation on the edge of their territory called Velmore Station. 5,000 alien workers extracted rare metals from asteroid fields, while protected by a small defense fleet. They had no idea that death was coming for them through quantum tunnels in space. High Command Zethkar received reports of the station's disappearance with cold indifference. The supreme overlord of the HFY collective had grown fat and lazy in the 10 years since eliminating the human threat. His advisors suggested equipment failure or pirate attacks, but Zethkar dismissed the incident as unimportant. The attacks began to escalate as human strike teams hit targets across HFY space. Supply convoys vanished while traveling through hyperspace, leaving no wreckage or distress signals. Military outposts went silent with their personnel found dead, but showing no wounds or signs of struggle. Dr. Kane had perfected her quantum weapons beyond simple destruction. The disruptor beams now worked at the molecular level, causing living tissue to simply stop existing without pain or trauma. HFY soldiers would be found at their post appearing to sleep, but their bodies would be empty shells. The alien military commanders began experiencing something they had not felt in centuries of conquest. Fear crept through their ranks as bases disappeared and patrols failed to return. Their advanced sensors could not detect the quantum signatures that human ships now used to move through folded space. Jake Morrison stood in his private quarters, studying intelligence reports about HFY troop movements. His reflection in the mirror showed a being that barely resembled the transport captain he had once been. Quantum exposure had elongated his limbs and sharpened his features into something almost alien. The human fleet could now appear anywhere in normal space without warning. Their ships phased in and out of reality like ghosts, striking with devastating effect before vanishing into quantum tunnels. No HFY weapon could lock onto targets that existed partially outside normal physics. Each attack was carefully planned to cause maximum psychological damage while revealing nothing about human capabilities. Jake wanted the aliens to know they were being hunted, but not by whom or how. Terror was a weapon that could be just as effective as quantum disruptors. The Galactic Council finally took notice when HFY Ambassador Velthak arrived at their headquarters in obvious panic. The normally composed alien shook with fear as he described the systematic destruction of his people's military assets by an unknown force that left no survivors or evidence. Apton Nordwin of the Yulmar investigation service led a team to examine the sites of recent attacks. These professional diplomats had seen warfare between dozens of species, but nothing like the quantum signatures they found at destroyed HFY facilities. The technology seemed to violate known physics. Some council members began to whisper that the extinct humans might have survived their genocide, but such ideas seemed impossible. The HFY had assured everyone that their extermination campaign was complete and thorough. How could a species return from total annihilation? Jake Morrison decided it was time to announce humanity's return to the galaxy. He used quantum projection technology to appear as a flickering hologram in the council chambers while his physical body remained safely aboard the Vengeance light years away. The assembled alien diplomats gasped in shock as they recognized the human form materializing in their meeting hall. Jake's appearance had been changed by years of quantum exposure, but his species was unmistakable. His voice carried strange harmonics as he spoke words that chilled every alien present. You watched them kill us and did nothing to stop it. Your council voted to accept their lies about human aggression, while our children burned on 50 billion worlds. Now you get to watch us kill them. Ambassador Velthak tried to protest that the HFY had acted in galactic security interests, but Jake's glowing eyes focused on him with terrible intensity. The alien fell silent as he realized he was looking at something that had transcended normal biological limits through sheer force of hatred. We learned from our enemies how to be thorough, Jake continued. The HFY taught us that if you want to eliminate a threat, you must leave no survivors and show no mercy. They were excellent teachers. The hologram flickered and vanished, leaving the council chambers in stunned silence. Within hours, emergency sessions convened as alien governments tried to understand the implications of humanity's return. Some species that had profited from human destruction began preparing their defenses. But Jake Morrison and his quantum-powered fleet were already moving toward their next targets. HFY military bases across 3 star systems detected impossible energy signatures moments before quantum disruptors turned their installations into expanding clouds of dissociated atoms. The galaxy was about to learn that some species cannot be safely eliminated. Humanity had returned from extinction as something far more dangerous than they had ever been before. The monsters were loose, and they remembered every slight, every betrayal, every moment of indifference during their darkest hour. The galactic community watched in horror as human fleets emerged from quantum space around major HFY worlds, like demons materializing from nightmares. These were not the peaceful explorers and diplomats that aliens remembered from decades past. These were weapons of war shaped by absolute hatred and powered by impossible technology. Captain Linda Hayes commanded the assault ship Retribution as it phased into normal space above Carthex Prime, the strongest HFY military fortress in their empire. Her crew had been children when the genocide began, and they had spent their entire adult lives preparing for this moment of revenge. Commander Steve Martin worked at his tactical station coordinating strikes against planetary defense systems. His parents had died in the orbital bombardment of New Geneva, and their screams still echoed in his dreams. Every HFY installation he destroyed brought him closer to the peace that only complete vengeance could provide, Nicole. Brooks operated the quantum targeting systems with surgical precision as she identified priority targets across the planet's surface. Her little sister had been torn apart by atmospheric processors on Haven's Rest, and Nicole remembered every detail of that final transmission. Now she returned the favor with weapons that erased matter from existence. The HFY defenders found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to ignore the laws of physics. Human ships appeared inside their defensive perimeters without warning, and fired weapons that passed through energy shields as if they did not exist. Quantum disruptors reached through solid matter to destroy targets deep underground. Supreme Overlord Zethkar watched helplessly from his command bunker as his empire's strongest fortress crumbled under human assault. His military advisors had no answers for weapons that worked on principles their science could not understand. The humans had learned to manipulate reality itself. The human forces used tactics copied directly from the HFY playbook, but refined through years of careful study. Instead of destroying infrastructure, they targeted leadership and military personnel with pinpoint quantum strikes. They planned to use these worlds, not turn them into lifeless rocks. Dr. Kane had spent the past year building her ultimate creation in the deepest laboratories aboard the Vengeance. She called it the Quantum Cascade Device, and its power dwarfed even the planet-killing disruptors that armed their fleet. This weapon could unravel the bonds that held entire star systems together. Kane activated the device as human forces withdrew from Carthex Prime and focused its impossible energies on the nearby research world of Velmar. The planet's sun began to fluctuate as quantum fields tore apart the nuclear reactions in its core. Within hours, the star collapsed into a sphere of twisted space-time that consumed everything in the system. The demonstration sent shockwaves through HFY leadership as they realized the humans could destroy not just planets but entire solar systems. Zethkar sent desperate messages to his remaining commanders ordering immediate surrender negotiations, but Jake Morrison had no interest in their pleas for mercy. The Galactic Council called emergency sessions as alien. Governments struggled to understand the implications of humanity's new capabilities. Yulmar Ambassador Keldrin volunteered to serve as mediator between the humans and their targets, hoping to prevent further escalation of what was becoming a war of extermination. Jake Morrison agreed to meet with council representatives aboard the Quantum Fortress that had once been the New Horizon. The massive ship now existed partially outside normal spacetime, its hull rippling with energies that made alien sensors malfunction. Visiting diplomats needed special equipment just to survive in its presence. The meeting room defied conventional architecture as quantum fields warped space into impossible geometries. Jake materialized from thin air as his consciousness transferred between multiple dimensional states. His appearance had changed so dramatically that only genetic scans confirmed his human origin. "You want us to show mercy?" Jake asked, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated through dimensions. "Did they show mercy to our children when they burned our nurseries? Did you intervene when they stripped the atmosphere from our farming worlds?" Ambassador Keldrin tried to explain that the council had been deceived about human intentions, but Jake's glowing eyes showed no forgiveness. The alien diplomat realized he was speaking to something that had transcended normal biological limitations through pure hatred and quantum transformation. Jake gestured to display screens showing the ongoing systematic elimination of HFY colonies across their empire. Human fleets struck with perfect coordination, erasing military installations and government centers while leaving civilian populations alive to witness their species' destruction. The message was clear: surrender or watch your civilization die. We're simply finishing what they started. Jake continued. They taught us that genocide is an acceptable solution to political problems. Now they get to experience their own lesson. The HFY attempted one final desperate assault on the human fleet, throwing everything they had at Morrison's forces in a last chance to save their species. The battle above their capital world became a showcase of how far humanity had evolved beyond conventional warfare. HFY battleships fired their most powerful weapons at human vessels that simply absorbed the energy and redirected it back at their attackers. Quantum shields turned incoming missiles into harmless light while reality warping drives let human ships appear inside enemy formations and destroy them from within. The alien fleet died without inflicting a single casualty on their human enemies. HFY ships phased out of existence as quantum disruptors tore apart the very space they occupied. Within hours, centuries of HFY military buildup became expanding clouds of dissociated particles. Supreme Overlord Zethkar made a final broadcast to his surviving colonies, warning them about the human monsters his people had created through their attempted genocide. But Jake Morrison allowed the transmission to continue and added his own message that chilled every alien who heard it. Let this be a lesson to any species that believes extinction is an acceptable solution to their problems. We remember every world you burned, every child you murdered, every moment you made our people suffer. The galaxy wanted us gone, so we became something worse than gone. We became inevitable. The last HFY strongholds fell within days as human forces completed their systematic dismantling of the empire that had tried to erase them from existence. But Jake Morrison and Dr. Kane had prepared something far more terrible than simple military conquest. They were about to show the galaxy what true extinction looked like. The final HFY stronghold fell after a siege that lasted only 3 hours, but felt like an eternity to the defending aliens. Supreme Overlord Zethkar watched from his command center as human quantum weapons tore through defenses that had protected his capital world for 1,000 years. His empire was ending not with glory, but with the systematic dismantling of everything his species had built. Commander Rachel Kim led the final assault teams through the corridors of the HFY government complex. She had been born in the hidden asteroid bases after the genocide and knew no life except preparation for this moment. Her soldiers moved through enemy positions like ghosts, their quantum-enhanced bodies passing through solid matter to strike from impossible angles. Zethkar attempted to broadcast one last warning to the galaxy about the monsters. His people had awakened, but Jake Morrison allowed the transmission to proceed. The alien leader's words carried across space to every species in the galactic community, as he described the terrible price of attempting genocide against humanity. We thought we were eliminating a threat, Zethkar said as explosions shook his bunker. Instead, we created something far worse than we ever imagined. They are no longer bound by the laws that govern other species. Do not make our mistake. Jake Morrison materialized in the command center through quantum teleportation, his transformed body flickering between dimensions as reality bent around his presence. The Supreme Overlord who had ordered the death of 50 billion humans now cowered before the ghost of his victim's revenge. Your people taught us that mercy is weakness, Jake said as his silver eyes examined the alien who had destroyed his species' innocence. Thank you for the lesson. Now we return it with interest. Dr. Kane activated the quantum resonance cascade from her laboratory deep inside the Vengeance. This device represented the culmination of 15 years spent studying HFY technology and turning their own science against them. Every piece of alien equipment, every genetic sample they had stolen from humans, every trace of their civilization began to vibrate at frequencies that tore apart molecular bonds. The effect spread across the galaxy faster than light itself as quantum fields carried the resonance to every corner of HFY space. Their ships dissolved into component atoms while their cities crumbled into dust. But the weapon went deeper than mere destruction, reaching into the quantum foam that underlies all reality. Within hours, the HFY species ceased to exist, not just in the present, but throughout all of history. The universe itself began rewriting its own past to eliminate every trace that they had ever lived. Stars that had been dimmed by HFY construction projects suddenly burned brighter as their industrial installations vanished from the timeline. The galactic community reacted with a mixture of horror and fascination as they tried to understand what had happened. Species that had once dismissed humanity's destruction now sent urgent diplomatic missions requesting peaceful relations. The message was clear. Humanity remembered every slight, every betrayal, every moment of indifference during their darkest hour. Commander Rachel Kim established the new human diplomatic protocols with representatives from dozens of alien governments. Her voice carried no warmth as she explained humanity's new position in galactic politics. They would engage with other species, but only on terms that ensured such betrayal could never happen again. The Yulmar ambassador, who had once profited from selling human colonies to the Kethvar, now begged for forgiveness. The Trixan merchants who had stripped resources from dead human worlds offered massive reparations. Every species that had participated in or ignored the genocide suddenly found themselves desperate to appease the monsters they had helped create. The Galactic Council passed Resolution 0398 designating humanity as a protected observer species, which was a diplomatic way of acknowledging that they were too dangerous to threaten, but too powerful to exclude. Council meetings now included empty chairs where Kethvar representatives had once sat. Though most aliens were beginning to forget that such a species had ever existed, Yulmar scientists studying the quantum signatures where Kethvar worlds had been found something that terrified them. The erasure had been so complete that space-time itself was healing around the missing matter. The universe was actively forgetting that the Kethvar had ever existed, rewriting physics to accommodate their absence. Jake Morrison established humanity's new role as the galaxy's watchful guardians of justice. Human space became a quantum-protected region where reality itself bent to their will. Ships entering without permission discovered that the laws of physics no longer applied to them in predictable ways. Most simply ceased to exist. The quantum fortress that had once been the New Horizon took position in the space where Earth had orbited before its destruction. Jake stood in the memorial chamber surrounded by holographic displays, showing the names and faces of every human who had died in the genocide. All 47 billion victims were remembered here in perfect detail. They thought extinction would silence us, Jake said to his assembled commanders as they gathered for the memorial service. Instead, it taught us that some lines can never be crossed. The galaxy will remember this lesson for as long as stars burn in the void. Human colonies began, appearing throughout the galaxy but not through traditional settlement methods. Dr. Kane's quantum manipulation technology allowed them to restructure suitable worlds at the molecular level, transforming dead rocks into garden paradises within hours. Humanity was returning to claim their place among the stars. The new human colonies were defended by reality itself as quantum fields made conventional weapons useless against them. Alien visitors described worlds where gravity flowed upward, where light bent around corners, and where time moved at different speeds in different locations. Humanity had transcended normal physical limitations. Jake Morrison looked out at the transformed galaxy from his command center and felt something approaching satisfaction. The species that had tried to erase humanity from existence were now themselves erased so completely that most aliens could not remember what had happened to them. The empty spaces in galactic maps were simply accepted as natural. Scout reports indicated that human influence was spreading beyond their protected territories. Quantum anomalies appeared near worlds where injustice flourished, serving as warnings to species that might consider following the Kethvar path. The galaxy had learned that some monsters were made, not born, and that the greatest mistake was believing genocide could ever truly succeed against a species determined to survive. The stars themselves now carried the echo of humanity's transformation, quantum signatures that would endure until the heat death of the universe. They had become something that made destruction itself obsolete, transcending the cycle of violence that had nearly consumed them. The galaxy would never forget the lesson written in the void where their enemies used to exist.